Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and this week we are diving into a movie that on the surface level looks like a fairly standard kids movie sequel, but underneath is hiding stories of a nearly 2-year delay between starting and finishing the movie, and a director who spent some time kidnapped as a political prisoner. That's right, today we are diving deep into 1995's Three Ninjas Knuckle Up, directed by Simon Sheen, aka Shin Sang-ok, and starring Victor Wong, Charles Napier, Michael Traynor, Max Elliott Slade, and Chad Power. We'll dive into how the movie came to be, all of the crazy stories surrounding its production, everything that makes the movie still worth watching today, and its legacy over 30 years later. Now, I have to confess, I don't think I'd seen this movie since I was like 10 or so we're talking like 25 plus years since I last watched it, and I remembered absolutely nothing about it. It was actually a really interesting experience. Like, nothing in this movie jogged my memory and made me go, oh yeah, I remember this part, which is kind of interesting because I genuinely believe that the story found here in Knuckle Up is 10 times stronger than the central story of the first movie. Like, the first movie is about this bad guy trying to sell weapons, so he kidnaps the kids of an FBI agent to get the FBI off his back until he can sell the guns, but that's it. Knuckle Up at least has a central premise that's genuinely engaging and shockingly still relevant today. We follow as Rocky, Colt, and Tum Tum help their friend Joe and the people of her tribe to stop a rich guy who's dumping toxic waste on their land and bribing off government officials to make it happen. See, that's a way better story overall. It has stakes, and we actually get to hang out with and see the consequences of what the bad guys are doing rather than just hearing he's a bad guy like we did in the first movie. Unfortunately for Knuckle Up, it doesn't quite execute on the premise in a way that really stuck with me. I'd say like at least 60% of this movie's running time is dedicated to choreographed fight scenes and the boys yelling over and over again. But also, I'll always be happy to see Victor Wong on my screen, and I think the opening of this movie with him waking up the boys is really fun and sweet.
There's no food in the refrigerator, Grandpa!
Plus, I love how obvious his stunt double is in all of his fighting scenes. It's actually incredible. But before I start diving too deep into the movie itself, let's instead head back to 1992 and learn a little bit more about how this movie came to be. And it all begins with the first Three Ninjas movie making $29 million against a $2.5 million budget, and the studio looking at the property and wanting to immediately cash in with a sequel. So Victor Wong and all three boys signed back on, and the script duties were given to Alex S. Kim, who had been an assistant to the producers on the first movie. And again, I think the premise he came up with is genuinely pretty strong. As for the director, they went with Shin Sang-ok, who was a Korean director who had already directed over 70 films at this point in his career. And there was also this little 8-year period where he and his then ex-wife, Chae Won-hee, were both kidnapped by Kim Jong-il, who brought them to North Korea and forced them to improve the North Korean film industry. And as I'm sure you can gather, it was not exactly a great time. After first being abducted, Shin tried to escape 2 different times before being placed in a North Korean re-education camp for 2 years. And then in 1983, after he'd already been in North Korea for almost 5 years, he finally met Jong and had it confirmed that his ex-wife had also been kidnapped, and the two actually remarried while imprisoned under Jong's suggestion, but they would stay together for the rest of their lives. So finally, in 1986, the couple were in Vienna to show their latest film, a Godzilla knockoff called Pulgasari, and they were able to escape to the US Embassy, where they were granted asylum and moved to the US. So when he agreed to direct Three Ninjas Knuckle Up, it was kind of a big deal. His first non-propaganda film in over a decade, his first English language movie ever, and his first movie since being freed from North Korea. And unfortunately, try as I might, I really could not find any information as to how Shin ended up working with the Three Ninjas franchise. Because while this may have been the only movie in the franchise he directed, he did produce this, Kickback, and High Noon at Mega Mountain. But like I said, the original movie had been such a hit that this movie was immediately rushed into production. And in the fall of 1992, with their cast, director, script, and a budget of, wait a second, there's actually no reported budget for this movie. Wow. So anyway, production began, and it sounds like the team got about 80 or 90% of the way through filming before they had to stop due to legal and rights reasons. And this is another one of those things that, try as I might, I just could not not figure out what happened to make this movie pause production. My best guess is that the first movie was released by Touchstone, who was owned by Disney, and they were never super happy with the first movie to begin with, insisting on toning down the violence, so I'd imagine that the stopping of production had something to do with the move from Touchstone to TriStar. But there are two crazy things about them pushing the production here. The first is that they just decided to go ahead and make an entirely different third film instead while they waited for the legal troubles to shake out, which is how we ended up getting Three Ninjas Kickback released a full year before this movie. And the other is that after the legal issues did shake out, they still had to go back and shoot several scenes for this movie, which is how we get Rocky's disappearing and reappearing braces in several scenes, and the fact that Colt and Tum Tum both look a full 2 years older in random scenes, mostly at Grandpa's cabin. And finally, on March 10th, 1995, Three Ninjas Knuckle Up released into just 52 theaters, and sadly, on its opening weekend, it would place 18th at the box office, making just $67,000, before going on to make a grand total of just $413,000, making this a massive disappointment for the studio. Not only did it perform poorly at the box office, but it got nearly universal terrible reviews from everyone who reviewed it. But like, this wasn't a movie that was supposed to do well or perform well with critics. The goal was to get it out on home video, and I have to imagine that once this thing hit home video, it became very profitable, because every single kid who saw the first movie had to see both this movie and Kickback as soon as we heard there were sequels out. I actually remember that this movie having the original kids while Kickback didn't actually broke my brain as a kid, but that's a story for a different video. Apologies for the interruption, but I wanted to jump in and tell you about today's sponsor, which happens to be brought to you by the members of my Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. I actually just reworked all of the tiers, so now the friend of the show tier, which is just $3 a month, gets you early ad-free access to all new videos, access to members-only videos, and you get credited as a friend of the show at the end of every video. So if you've been curious to check it out, now would be a great time to do it, because I've also set all tiers to be completely free for a trial period. And just a reminder, Born to Rant is a completely independent channel, and I use absolutely no AI in the making of my videos. So even if the Patreon isn't your thing, it would mean the world if you could still take a moment to either like the video or subscribe to the channel. And with all of that out of the way, I think it's time for us to throw on some historically inaccurate war paint, yell, and dive into everything that makes Three Ninjas Knuckle Up still worth watching today.
What is this? Mercedes-Benz?
It means peas, pizza brains.
Peas? I hate peas.
So if we're talking about what makes this movie still worth watching today, I do think a lot of it boils down to nostalgia. If you don't have any nostalgia for this movie, I'm not sure that it's worth watching for the first time as an adult. But like I said earlier, I do think that this movie has a generally stronger premise than the first movie. It's just that it really pads its already incredible short running time with endless action sequences, some of which are great, like the three main boys are pretty solid martial artists, and they handle the choreography quite well. But I like that the movie just dives right into the story immediately. We open on the boys coming into town in their grandpa's car with some fun bickering voiceover, of course, and then we immediately get the entire setup for the movie. When the car stops and we're introduced to the Native American people living on the land, we've got Crystal Lightning as our boy's main ally, Joe. We're also introduced to our impressive cast of bad guys. We've got one of the best character actors of all time, with Charles Napier as Jack, and his stooges played by Patrick Kilpatrick, Donald Logue, and Bob Pinciotti himself as the sheriff. But anyway, this first confrontation sets up the movie. We've got rich businessman who wants to dump toxic waste on the natives' land, and I actually really like that shortly after this sequence, the movie shows us a funeral of someone who died because of the waste. It actually adds real stakes to the overall story. And then we cut to the next morning to see the boys waking up and beginning their training with Grandpa, and this is the first of a few times we'll see both Rocky and Colt looking visibly older, complete with Rocky having braces. After training, the little family goes into town for some pizza, and some of Jack's goons come in and immediately start causing problems, which gives us our first big fight sequence of the movie. The way the fight starts with just Colt and Tum Tum doing all the fighting while Rocky is distracted playing video games is pretty silly, but also pretty fun. And I think this is where the main problems of the movie really start to shine through. We're still watching these boys boys beat up adult bad guys, and that is fun. But there's three main problems with the bad guys in this movie. No Hammer,
Dude.
no Marcus,
Dude.
and no Fester.
Bummer.
No, but seriously, in the first movie, those three had so much personality and were such boneheads. You not only enjoyed watching the kids beat them up, but you're giggling at all of their silly dialogue throughout the entire sequence.
Where is Fester? Tits, bail me out.
And the bad guys in this movie just have absolutely no personality, which is a real shame because we all know that Donald Lowe can be a really fun bad guy when he wants to be.
You can slice him, you can dice him, but the Queen Man just keeps on coming.
After the boys have had their fun, Grandpa drags them out of the pizza place and lectures them about the dangers of wanting to be a hero for recognition's sake. Something that only Rocky really seems to listen to, and the next morning Grandpa sends them back to the pizza place to help clean up, which is where our story really kicks into gear. The boys finally meet Joe,
I'm filthy. Rocky.
Hi, Filthy Rocky.
who tells them all about the bad guys, the toxic waste, and the fact that she's pretty sure the bad guys kidnapped her dad. So the boys take it upon themselves to jump in the back of the bad guy's pickup truck, and well, they find Joe's dad pretty much immediately and make a plan to break him out later that night. And I think this is genuinely the best stretch of the movie. The story is engaging, the stakes feel real, and it has a nice balance between story and action. Like the boys putting on their war paint is very silly and fun, and the actual breaking out of Joe's dad is really well done. And I like that he immediately tells us about our MacGuffin disc,
Don't shoot the arrows anymore.
which will prove that the bad guys are really being bad guys. And like I said, I think this is the best stretch of the movie. It looks the best. Cinematographer Eugene Shoglet really uses the dark and the labyrinth of the shredded paper to create some fun dynamics. Plus, when the bad guys set the sewer on fire, it looks cool as hell. I also really love that after this, when the boys sneak back into Grandpa's house, Tum Tum can't help but go for food, and we get this great visual joke of them forgetting to take the war paint off and Grandpa almost catching it. The next night, the boys are invited to join the tribe for a celebration, and we get this very 90s dance sequence that actually kind of reminded me of that one dance sequence from Smart House. But this, of course, then just evolves into yet another action sequence, but this one isn't as fun as the one before or the ones that come after. But Grandpa shows up to help, and that's fun, as is seeing the obvious stunt double who has a completely different way of standing than Grandpa does. But anyway, with the help of Grandpa, the boys and the rest of the natives are able to drive the bad guys away, a nice little small victory. We then head into the final stretch of the movie, but again, it quickly devolves into yet another action sequence. This one's got a fun car chase though. The bad guys show up and kidnap Joe straight out of her mom's car, which is kinda crazy, and the plan here is to blackmail Joe's dad into not showing the disc at an upcoming hearing, which in fairness to the bad guys does work, at least for a minute, but more on that in a moment. Because the next 30 minutes is one long action sequence that sees Rocky trying to drive Joe's mom's car and being absolutely terrible at it, the boys rescuing Joe, racing to the courthouse, delivering the disc, and then collapsing from exhaustion outside the courthouse. I also have to say, I absolutely love the touch of how dirty and sweaty the boys are by the end of the movie, and that they learn that doing the right thing is all that matters. Taking credit for heroic actions doesn't make them heroes, it makes them people looking for attention. And then the movie ends with Grandpa teaching the boys that ninjas can in fact fly.
People can't fly, but ninjas can.
So over 30 years later, what is the legacy of Three Ninjas Knuckle Up? Well, I think it all really depends on who you ask, because this is a franchise where it all kind of depends which movies from it you saw the most as a kid. I think I only ever saw this one a couple of times, so I personally don't have much nostalgia for it. But when I covered the first movie, I got a lot of comments from people saying this one in particular was their favorite. And like I've said multiple times, this movie does have a better story, so I kind of get it. But from a pacing perspective, I think halfway through this movie completely loses steam. It's also obviously a big part of the legacy that this movie was shot before Kickback but released after, which I think caused quite a bit of confusion among 90s kids at the time. I know it confused the hell out of me. There's also the fact that this was the last Three Ninjas movie to feature all three of the original boys. Kickback had to replace Rocky and Tum Tum, and High Noon at Mega Mountain replaced all three boys. And this would also be the last movie ever directed by Shin Sang-ok. Shortly after this, he and his wife would relocate escape back to South Korea, where he would spend the last few years of his life before sadly passing in 2006. If you've made it this far into the video, a very sincere thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to all of my supporters on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. You all truly keep this channel running. Like I said earlier, I've set all memberships to be free for a trial period, so if you're curious, come join us and check out the members only video on the Burbs coming later this week. And that's going to do it for Born to Rant this week. Okay, thank you. Bye bye.